the final countdown. For Gus? Well, for UCF football, as the season comes to a close this Friday night for an 8 p.m. game on national TV, probably the worst national TV game you could think of. Do the Knights have it in them for one more win on the season? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Charge On. As always, I'm your host, Sean Green. Before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor, BetOnline. This Thanksgiving holiday, why not head to the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting, BetOnline. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with constant real-time odds in action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC and boxing. Head to the website today to see why BetOnline is America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Couple things. Happy Thanksgiving. This is coming out, obviously, on Wednesday. Thanksgiving is tomorrow. Hope you all enjoy the day before a really bad football game on Friday. Thursday's going to be fun. You got NFL to watch. It's going to be enjoyable. And then you have bad football.
Is it?
Friday. I mean, it's better than what we're going to see Friday, Nick.
I got to be honest. 4:30 on Thursday is a great time, I think, to start snoozing. Have some Thanksgiving dinner early, and then 4:30 is going to come around, and it's time to snooze.
Depends on when your family or families eat or are hosting their thing. Because, like, I have a couple different places I need to go, and it's basically all afternoon. So,
You're still doing that?
You know, you have to. You have to appease all parties.
See,
So,
I remember me and my wife did that whole thing. 'Cause we've been together since high school, which is like 8 years now, which is crazy to say out loud. And we started the first couple years, we had to go to 4 different households on that one day. And it's hell. And nobody lives like, within like a little radius of each other. But somehow we've figured it out to where we only have to go to one place now. So it's perfect. One stop.
see, me and my girlfriend, we just, it sucks, but we go to our own families because, like, she's got 2 different places to go. I have 2 different places to go. So we're like, let's just cut through the middle, give ourselves off to our families and get it over with. So holidays are more of a headache. We love it, though. So I hope you guys are enjoying your time and enjoying the holiday. I also want to give a special shout out to Coke. Oh, Coca-Cola. You can see it on the hat. I got one of these nice Knights hats that the students got at the basketball game. Go get yourself a Coke Zero or whatever type of Coke product you drink, because I appreciate the hat. It's nice. Always love new hats. So I want to give a special shout out to Coke. With that being said, I'm going to talk about Gus Malzahn.
Why not, eh? Why not?
I mean, you guys see the thumbnail? That was come up with by Nick Geddes right there. Didn't know what I was going to put as a thumbnail. Which coach is going to retire? Which coach is going to get fired? Who knows? We're going to tell you what we know. Because listen, I will say this. We've kept it 100 on this show. We have not said anything. What have we said, Nick? We've said everything is fluid. That's been our word of the season for Charge On, fluid. Everything's been fluid. I was told this week by people I trust and people that know a lot more than me that Gus Malzahn is most likely going to be staying as the head coach for UCF next season. This has not been outwardly confirmed, so take it with a grain of salt. We are not insiders. I've always said that. We are not news breakers. We just say things, and usually they end up happening. So we have heard that Gus Malzahn will be staying on as the head coach at UCF. I'm not going to go into much detail besides that. You can all speculate yourselves because we know UCF Twitter loves to do that. But it looks like, at least right now, regardless of what happens for this game, regardless of what has happened in the last 2 years, that Gus Malzahn will be the head coach at UCF in 2025. So I want to get Nick. We've said kind of our thoughts on this. We've been Gus supporters. We're probably the last podcast in the UCF sphere that hopped off the Gus bus. And seems like nobody's going to get their wish. Now, we'll talk maybe positives, and we'll get to the UCF versus Utah game. For some reason, any of you that want to just see that, time codes are down below. Utah fans, if you want to see that, go on right ahead. But Nick, kind of give your takes. This has obviously not been announced. This is not confirmed, nothing like that. This is just what we've been hearing. But if it is true and Gus Malzahn is the head coach next year, what are your thoughts?
I'm empty inside. I mean, listen, if this happens, there's always a possibility because the buyout is what it is. And we know that UCF doesn't exactly have what I would say the best financial situation at the moment and the ability to just pay a large buyout. And we know that in the grand scheme of things, this buyout is not crazy, but for UCF, it definitely is. And so even if Gus was not going to return next year as the head coach, if he doesn't end up returning as the head coach next year, you probably would have thought there was going to have to be something done to try to minimize that. But I mean, listen, Gus was asked right after the game about the report that said that he could be potentially a retiring candidate. He said, "I'm not going to retire." I don't know where that came from. And that was it, right? And honestly, if you're Gus Malzahn, why would he? What's the incentive for Gus Malzahn to retire? That's the other part of this is when he has a $13 million buyout, or $12 million, whatever it is, waiting for him. That he knows that the school cannot pay. So it's so funny. Listen, we've talked ad nauseum about this whole thing over the last few weeks. It's really taken over precedent of the games that have been played. Losers of 7 of 8. It's hard to believe we've gotten to the end of the road, by the way, this season. It feels like we just were like prepping for, a game against New Hampshire, and we had the whole season ahead of us, and in a blink of an eye, it's gone just like that. It's going to be over with on Friday, and UCF's not going to be playing any postseason football, which sucks. But on the topic of Gus, I was trying to see okay, what are the real issues here with Gus Malzahn, and where is this program falling short? Other than the things that we've sort of talked about and the stuff that we see during game days. And I put out this tweet the other day. It was right after the game against West Virginia. And I went through every roster that Gus Malzahn has had from 2021 to 2024, and I just did a simple thing. I counted all the players who were a part of his recruiting classes, and I wanted to see which one I would call as hits, which ones I would call as misses, and which ones I would say are just kind of in the middle of the road. Maybe they play a role in the team, but they're not anything to write home about. And Sean, the only 2 players that I could count that I would say are definitive hits were Brandon Adams and Randy Pittman Jr. It was pretty much it. And I even think in the case of Brandon Adams,
He wasn't even a Gus recruiter.
That's what I was going to say. He was a part of Gus's inaugural class, but I'm pretty sure he was a Heupel guy. I think he was still a Heupel.
Heupel recruited him.
Yeah,
I don't even think he was in the Gus class. The first Gus. He wasn't in the first Gus class. He was in the
2021 class, I believe.
Yeah, but that was Heupel's. That was Heupel's class.
It was Heupel's class that Gus sort of inherited.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, if you take him out of the equation, then you're really looking at Randy Pittman. And yes, there's other guys. There's the Caden Kittlers of the world. There's the Malachi Lawrences of the world. I know some people were chiming in talking about Xavier Townsend, which I really don't care about because he's not here anymore, quite frankly. And I don't think he was ever really used to his fullest potential to begin with. So the best players on this team, the best players that Gus has had throughout his tenure, we're talking RJ Harvey, transfer. We're talking, and that was a transfer before. Was that before Gus?
Yep.
That was before Gus. We're talking
just a summer or just a season before he came
right
with Heupel.
We're talking Javon Baker, transfer. We're talking Kobe Hudson, transfer. Every quarterback, not every quarterback, but John Rice Plumlee, transfer. KJ Jefferson was a transfer. Jakari Brown was a transfer. Amari Kite was a transfer. And then you go to the defensive side of the ball, Lee Hunter, Ricky Barber, Mac McWilliams. When you bring it back to the current team that we're watching, and some of the other guys who left the program or went to the NFL or wherever they went off to. My only takeaway from that is it seems like there's a big development issue going on right here, or there's a lack of trust in some of the guys they've recruited. And it got me thinking, because what have we always talked about? The strength of Gus Malzahn was always the recruiting, the way he could recruit the guys that he could attract to this program that this program was unable to attract before. But when you put it in the terms that I just sort of laid out for you, and the lack of hits that are coming from this recruiting classes, it's like, what does that even matter then? What does it matter if UCF is recruiting in the top 40 or the top 35 or the top 30 when none of these players are even going on to help you win games? So that's sort of where I'm at with this. It's like, I'm trying to figure out where Gus Malzahn's strengths are right now for the program. And we already know this current recruiting class is nowhere what it was just 2 months ago, what it should have been if you wouldn't have completely collapsed throughout this season. So those are all still a lot of big question marks for me if he's going to return as the head coach. And we already saw he's not afraid to make big sweeping changes as he did last offseason. And it feels like there's got to be maybe a change in the way that they sort of construct this roster and who they choose to give playing time to and who they choose to bring in and who they choose to allocate funds to through the transfer portal, the type of player you're trying to go after. I mean, it seems to me like there's got to be sweeping changes yet again. And for someone who's going in year 5, it's a hard sell, personally to me. And I know it's a hard sell to a lot of people in the fan base.
Yeah, that's to put it lightly. I mean, we said before the season that regardless of what, I don't want to say told you so. I don't want to say any of that because I agree with how the fans feel. But we kind of said even before the season that regardless of what happens this season, Gus would be back in 25. Like if Gus had a bad year, he would still be back in 25. And I think as the season went on, we all kind of had this, there's no way because of how bad it was. But, you do look at a lot of factors. I think you mentioned it. And, you look at star players for UCF football, and those star players you mentioned are all transfers. The clip of transfers that have been impactful to a certain level just hasn't been there. I think they've fallen in love with the transfer portal over the last couple of years. And I think that's bit them. I think they're throwing out guys with experience and you're not building a team. And let me be very careful. Yes, I'm sure the guys all love each other. I'm sure they're trying to play for each other and they're trying to win games and they're playing for one another and they're playing with their brothers. I'm not trying to say that that's how, or it's not that. In college football in a lot of ways is not like that, or is like that now, right? Like at the end of the day, you're meshing a bunch of players that just met and you're trying to create a football team in 1 year. I think, this is just a thought, if Gus Malzahn does stay, which again, from what we're hearing, sounds like he is, I think there's no other choice you can make. You're not going to fire Tim Harris Jr. You're not going to fire Addison Williams. You're going to run it back with those guys. I'm sure you'll hire a couple different position coaches. But here's the underlying message. You're going to play young guys next year. There's a bunch of seniors graduating. There's a bunch of guys not coming back. The only option you have two options. It's either A, you play a bunch of your young guys that you've been developing and you've been having them wait in the wings. Or B, you kind of do what you did for the first season you were here, the first Big 12 season, and you just go basically replace your entire roster with transfers with a bunch of older guys and you start them. I don't think that's the way to go. I think it's been proven that it's not as efficient. I think you can find gems in the transfer portal, a la X-Ray Alexander. He is really impressed. He's probably, I don't think it's really up for debate, one of your starting linebackers next year. He's a really good young player. I think you look at a Dalen Dotson. If you would have played him early enough, I think he could have made an impact. You find some of these gems in the transfer portal, but then you find other players in the transfer portal that maybe have the years, but they don't necessarily have this, not saying they don't have skill, but they just don't perform that at the level that you need them to win 8, 9, 10 games in a season. So I think if we're looking at a Gus, and this is why, and I cautioned everybody early in the year when it was looking bad. I said, we're going to try to not talk about coaching candidates. We're not going to talk about Gus being fired, because then we'll be going crazy for the next year. Because at the end of the day, he's going to be the coach. And you're going to go drive yourself crazy for the next year. Well, now I feel like, Nick, we've gotten to that point where I think everybody's going to drive themselves crazy for the next 9 months. On this podcast, you're going to hear a lot of this talk over the next 9 months about how is this roster going to improve? Who are you going to be playing? These questions will be asked. Like, Gus is going to do a kind of wrap it up presser next week. The question is going to be, what are your plans for the roster? What are your ultimate goals? Are you going to the young core that you've been building for the last 3 years? Or are you going to do what you've been doing? And how has that worked? And one more thing before I kind of give it to you and we can wrap it up and go into Utah. People have been coming at Terry Mohajir, which I don't necessarily think is the right thing. I think Terry, in his time as AD, has done a good job. I don't think there's anything that's been egregious in what he's done. What I will say, though, giving Gus the 4-year extension was the biggest thing, the worst thing he could have done. His contract was coming up. You needed to give him an extension. I don't mind the extension. I mind the 4-year extension. You could have easily done a 2-year extension. I know in college football, it's very rare that a college coach doesn't get a hefty extension in terms of years. But it was the worst thing that you could have done, because now you are put in a hole. You are. If you wanted to pay Gus out, UCF is not the type of school that can afford a buyout like that. So that's what I'll say on it. It's going to be very interesting. And on this show, you're going to have a lot of talking for the next 9 months about this very topic, whether Gus is here or not. But if Gus is here, it's going to be a long 9 months of trying to figure out how this team somehow gets better. Nick, final thoughts on this?
It just feels like to me, but like if he ends up staying, it's almost like, and I understand the situation that they're in, they might not have a choice, but it's like, it's almost one of those things where it feels like you're delaying the inevitable, right? Like, that's what I can't help but think when it in the thought process of, hey, Gus is going to come back next year, because I'm trying to figure out what, like, and again, we're going to find this all out here in the next month or so, what this roster is going to really look like. But we've done this before. You know, they've gotten guys through the transfer portal, and you know, we look at these guys and we grade them and we say, hey, this is a really good pickup. And we said that a lot about some of these guys that are playing big roles on this team this year. And they turned out to not be good enough. And maybe some other guys in recent years also who we had higher hopes for because of where they were recruited. And this is the part that can get you in trouble, is the further you get away from a top recruit and when he was recruited, that to me is when it gets a bit riskier. And you start to almost look at, well, he was playing here. It might just be one of those situations where he can't get on the field here, but he's still got talent. He's gonna come here and he's gonna work out. And that hasn't happened with a lot of these players. And even in this class, in this transfer class he brought in particular, you know, the big names like the KJ Jeffersons of the world, the Penny Boones of the world, the Javarius Johnsons of the world, like a lot of these guys who came from bigger programs, right? Who we thought were going to play, or not Penny necessarily, but had a lot of production at Toledo. And we thought we're going to play big roles on this team, and not really. And all while you have a lot of young dudes who are still waiting in the wings and are not really getting a chance to play necessarily. And these are guys who are all coming from the best recruiting classes that UCF has ever had. So either those dudes just straight up can't play, or there's a stubbornness there to go with them, or there's a talent development issue, like I've been saying. Like, it's got to be one of those three things. And, I don't know. It's just the idea of Gus staying as this year has played out, and as we've seen the way that certain games have unfolded, it just is not an option that I am certainly in favor of, but it is. It might be the only option, unfortunately. And I think that's probably where this might be heading.
So you mentioned delaying the inevitable, and I talked about this with somebody earlier today, and it's a good topic. Number one, here's the only hope here's the positive outlook, Nick. Here's kind of the only positive that's going to hold me and you over the next 9 months, maybe more. I can't do math. So you said it hasn't worked out, right? You brought in a bunch of transfers from big time schools that had production at the previous school, thinking, oh, they're just going to come over and give similar production. Hasn't worked out. You've seen that the entire time Gus has been here, and it happens all over the country. I mean, this is not just a Gus issue. This is a, countrywide issue when it comes to college football. You enter the transfer portal and you don't know what you're going to get, really, right? I think Gus these last 2 years was so desperate to put together a Big 12 championship contender type year. And I think he didn't want to put all the pressure on the young guys. And again, we have no idea if it is a development thing, if they haven't been developing them well. You've seen guys early get on the field. Xavier Townsend started as a freshman. Randy Pittman basically was starting. Alec Holler was above him, but he basically was splitting time with Alec Holler. You've seen guys get on the field early. It just hasn't been to the effect because they're starting a bunch of transfers. Here's the positive for all you start the youngins and stop bringing in transfers, whatever. What does Gus have to lose at this point? Like, if they win, and we're going to talk about this game in a couple minutes. If they win 5 games this year, what does Gus have to lose? Like, okay, he gets fired next year. And this is where, like, the delaying the inevitable. The best case scenario is Gus comes out next year and has a really good year. But Gus is on a 1-year to 1-year basis now. He's had 2 really bad years back to back. 2 really bad years. Say next year he has a really good year. UCF's not giving him a contract extension. They're not. They're going to be like, great, you had a good year. Do it again. Like, yeah, we're not going to fire you. Like, say he goes and wins 8-9 games. I'm not saying he is, but say next year he comes out and wins 8-9 games. Terry Mahajer's not going, thank you so much, Gus. You had a great year. Let's give you another 3 years. No. He's going to say, do it again. And then if Gus has a bad year, then yeah, it's the delaying of the inevitable. But I think for Gus, and this is where for me, it's like, I would think that maybe he'd want to retire or just get out and he has 12 million reasons not to. But it's like for him, you're on a 1-year contract every year. Yeah, you have a buyout in the wings, but like you don't have a job. This is your only year that you have a job secured because the school that you're at just probably can't afford to pay you it. But I think the positive is he's probably going to pay. The youth movement's probably going to be hardcore next year for better or worse because there's nothing for him to lose to really be like, okay, I'm just going to go get a bunch of transfers and try to save or something. He's going to be like, okay, well, let's see if the guys that I've got as young kids are going to come in and kind of save my job for me.
Right. And I don't want to I don't want what I'm saying. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm like anti-transfer portal because I'm really not. And I already went through the list of guys that have come in during the Gus era and have been some of his best players. Like, I'm not anti-transfer portal.
But he's gone way too hard on it.
But it just has been an overemphasis on it. And even though there's been some big, big hits, there's been some big, big misses. And I mean, look, 2 of your 4 team captains came right to the portal this year, and KJ Jefferson, and we all know what's happening with him and what happened to him. And then the other is Ethan Barr, and guess what? every single game, there are many people who are watching Ethan Barr play and going, yeah, he's not good enough. He's just not good enough. And so yeah, I don't want it to sound like you can't go into the transfer portal, but I feel like the best programs around the country are typically the ones that perform really well in getting high school guys in and developing them, and then they supplement their additional needs through the transfer portal. I think that's typically the trend of what you see for the teams that have sustaining power. I'm not saying that I'm expecting UCF to be one of those schools, not saying that's my expectation whatsoever, but I think it gets you a little closer than where you are right now, which is sitting at 4 wins going into the final game of the season, when it feels like there was definitely more here to work with. But yeah, I don't know what else he has to lose. It just feels like something really desperately needs to change. And it's not just about the on-field product. I think the entire program itself, I think the energy from the fan base, I think everything has sort of waned here in the Gus era. Like, I even think about it, and I know that we don't maybe get the best gauge of it because, at least this year, because we've been up in the press box, but I don't even feel the same energy inside the stadium anymore.
It was certainly there early, but
it's early, but it goes away rather quickly because of what it's having on the field. And I understand we're never probably gonna see the same energy that we saw, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I understand that. And winning games, I think, influences that, but it just feels like everything is just sort of just in a rut right now, I guess is the best way to see it. It feels like everything's just sort of in a rut from the top down under the Gus era. It just feels like the upside that we thought was there is no longer there, and you're just sort of in the middle. And not even the middle. I mean, in your own conference right now, you are in the bottom. You are in the bottom. You came in as the new guy on the block last year, and you performed the best of the ones that came in. And we said last year, you said earlier that he's had 2 bad seasons in a row. I didn't even consider last year a bad season, to be honest with you.
But looking at it now, like you kind of group it now with this season as like, okay, like last year we looked at that as a positive, but because you had such a bad season this season, it's now looked at as a negative.
Right. And it continues the trend that every year they continue to take a step back every single year. There's nothing pointing in the positive direction. There's no indication that it's going to turn around rather quickly. There's none of that right now. And I just feel like that's where it's sort of this just meh feeling, I guess, is sort of transpired throughout the entire fan base.
Yeah, and listen, like I said, it's going to be a 9-month podcast episode. Like, we're going to be talking about this a lot. We'll be talking about it next week, about the state of the program, the season, a bunch of stuff on next week's show. But kind of to wrap this up in a little bow, I do agree. But I know UCF fans, and we know UCF fans, the minute they get somewhat of a winner, the fans turn it on. And maybe that's bad. Like, maybe people look at that as a bad fan base when if the team's not winning, they don't support. But at the end of the day, I can't blame fans. I can't blame fans for what the product on the field has been this season. To be like, you know what?
No, go ahead. Finish your thought. I'm
going to be like, no offense, but I can't blame a family of 4 to wake up on a Saturday and be like, you know what? I want to go watch UCF football this weekend and let's see who the quarterback is this weekend. Like, it's been a crap show.
I can't blame fans for feeling the way they do, because I'll go back to 4 years ago and everything that Gus Malzahn came right in and said, we're going to recruit like our hair is on fire. We're going to, we're talking, he's talking about the playoff, for crying out loud. That's back when there was 4 teams, not even 12. And now this is a place where you can win. And yeah, of course, if you get the right guy, you can win a national championship. And I just don't think they have the right guy. I just think that's where I've hit my point. And like you said, I feel like we tried to hold on as long as we could and give Gus every opportunity, and it's just not happening. It's just not happening. I know we could go on and on and on about this topic, and it is the big topic. Trust me. It's like I said, it's
The
It's
game is secondary.
The
And
game
that's
is
why
very
we've gone-
secondary.
That's why we've gone 30 minutes on this topic,
Yeah.
because the game is secondary. It's two teams that are not going to a bowl game, and this game absolutely means absolutely nothing.
Right. And so, yeah, in closing, I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that it feels like a lot of people were sold false hope and thought by now that they would be in this different stratosphere, and they're just not. And they're very far from it. And yet people have invested a lot of their time. They've invested a lot of their money into this program with nothing to really show for it.
Yep. And I've said it, and I'll say it again. Like, here on Charge On, you're going to get a lot of this conversation over the next 9 months, for better or worse. There's going to be a lot of news that comes out over the next couple weeks. There's going to be a lot of news that comes out over the next couple months. I think there's a lot of interesting conversations that we would have had regardless of the outcome. But I think next season becomes a whole lot more interesting. Maybe not to the greater outskirt of fans that maybe are casual fans, but for people like me and Nick, there's a lot of, and for fans like you that are tuning in to this podcast, I think over the time until next season, there's going to be a lot of very huge questions that are going to need answers. And I think that's the exciting part about it, is who's going to be playing for UCF next year. Who's the starters? Who's going to kind of make their name? We've heard a lot of names that just haven't seen the field. Is it their time? Is it not?
Yeah.
You've got spring coming
what
up.
is a UCF, particularly offense, but you could throw the whole team in it. What does a UCF team look like without RJ Harvey? Because, I mean, I sort of opined on Twitter about this, the fact that he wasn't up for the
it's ridiculous.
I'm blanking now on what
Doak
they called it.
Doak Walker.
Doak Walker. There you go.
Absolutely, it's egregious. Like, it's
Yeah,
egregious.
I guess we should have expected it, but
It did, right? It was very simple. They went, who's the rushing leaders? They put the three guys in there without looking at the carries, without looking at the touchdowns. They just said, who's the three leading rushers in yards? And we're going to put those three. Because no offense to the UNC running back, he's a great back. He is a great back. He's not better than RJ Harvey. He's had like 50 less carries, and he only has like 17 more yards. And then the Iowa running back has I think he's got like 10 more carries, and I think like 30.
I didn't have a problem.
40.
I didn't have a problem with Caleb Johnson at all. Obviously, it didn't really matter. Ashton Genty's going to win the award.
Yeah.
It's in terms of I think RJ Harvey has been a special player for 2 years, and you just want to see him get that recognition and people to say, like, people to know, like, hey, RJ Harvey was that dude when he played at UCF, and I feel like he's just flown so under the radar outside of these circles. But I mean, again, when you don't win games, that sort of happens. But my point that I was making, it's like, what does a team without RJ Harvey look like? Because they have 4 wins this year. Without RJ Harvey, they probably have 2. And, well, maybe the Arizona game, because they completely blew them out. So at best, you have 3 wins without RJ Harvey. And then even last year, like, I'm sure if you went and looked at those wins that they had, and some of the close ones in particular, like, it's probably RJ Harvey saved the day, you know? Like, I don't know what that's going to look like going forward, because he has been, I mean, I understand you had Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson and some other things, but for much of it, RJ Harvey has been your offense. And that's a lot to replace, as it would be for any program. So we'll find that out in the offseason. We can finally get to the Utah game, which I know everybody is just patiently waiting to hear about.
Yeah, offseason starts next week, folks. So, which stinks to say, but
I'm ready.
Offseason starts next week. But guess
I'm
what?
ready.
You're ready, but we don't take time off, Nick. We don't take a week off. We're year round.
I am, but I hate to admit this. Like, I was when we were doing the watch along the other night, I'm watching the game, and I have no shame in admitting. I had no shame in admitting this. Like, and I only watched a half of it, mind you. I just found myself. I was just bored. I was bored out of my mind watching them play football.
Not fun.
And that's not where you want to be at. So as we segue into this, playing a Utah team, which, Sean,
8-3.
I had it pulled up right here. They have lost 7 straight games since starting out 4-0. 7 straight. They even lost by double digits to Arizona. who we saw UCF dispatched with ease. But yeah, what a great football game here. One team's lost 7 straight, and the other's lost 7 of 8.
Only on Fox, 8 p.m. 35 minutes of talking about UCF's head coach. Let's, like Nick said, segue into the game that we're supposed to talk about for a majority of these pre-game podcasts. UCF Utah, final game of the year. Everybody before the season said this might be one of the bigger games on the slate. It might have playoff implications. It might have conference championship implications. Well, that went all out the window. Out the window. Because what do you know? What was the thing that Utah talked about coming into the year with Utah? Can Cam Rising stay healthy? He couldn't. That was a no. But it seems like, Nick, nobody on Utah that has the QB title card next to their name can stay healthy either. They have now lost 4 quarterbacks to season-ending injury. 4. The starting quarterback for Utah this week is going to be Luke Batari from San Mateo, California, in the College of San Mateo. He is a walk-on. Their backup, Dallin Dallin Edgeman, a junior from Santa Ana College. Again, another walk-on. Here's the thing. And we're talking about Kyle Whittingham, legendary coach. There's a reason Utah was favored coming into the year. If you look at their scores, not the last couple weeks, the defense is, the team's unraveled, especially after the BYU game and that whole debacle. The team's unraveled the last 2 weeks. And again, quarterback play, terrible. Zach Wilson's brother, bad. But with that being said, they have been dealt such a bad hand. And I think if you switched the teams and UCF had the injuries that Utah did, we would be feeling sorry for Gus Malzahn. We'd be feeling sorry for the team. And I feel sorry for Utah and their fans, legitimately, even though they don't like to be in the Big 12. I feel sorry for them. They had all the expectations in the world this season. Everybody assumed this was going to be a team playing in the college football playoff and making a run in the college football playoff. And instead, they've now lost 8 straight or whatever it is. And you've lost basically every quarterback that you could think of playing meaningful snaps. And that's what their offense has been. Like, let's quickly look at their offense and their scores before I kind of throw the floor to you. I mean, besides the Southern Utah and Utah State game, because I don't really count those, they've put up 23 points, 22 points, 10 points, 19 points, 7 points, 14 points, 21 points, 24 points, and 28 points the last 2 weeks, respectively, against Colorado and Iowa State. But again, they're playing a completely different. They're playing a walk-on this week, so we don't know how their offense is going to be. But Nick, kind of give your overall thoughts on this Utah team. Kyle Whittingham, we've talked about it, potentially going to retire. Who knows? They already have a head coach in waiting, but this Utah team has just been killed this year when it comes to the injury bug.
Yeah, and their defense, to be honest with you, I mean, the Colorado game was the one where they completely unraveled and gave up 49 points. But, I mean, their defense, I mean, you're talking 23 Arizona, 27 Arizona State, 13 against TCU, 17 against Houston, 22 against BYU, and 31 against Iowa State. I mean, their defense has been able to keep them in these football games. But the problem with Utah has basically come on the offensive side of the ball. And when you have, quarterback issues the way they have all year, sort of similar to UCF, where they're starting quarterback number 4 now. Go figure on that one. But they have not surpassed 25 points in a single game since September 21st, their last victory against Oklahoma State. Yeah, if you can't score more than 25 points in a single game, you're probably not going to win any in college football. It's as simple as that. And so that's been their undoing. You've mentioned the injuries. I mean, hell, I feel bad for him because Brent Keefe, I mean, he's one of the best tight ends in college football when healthy. And unfortunately, earlier this month, he had a season-ending injury, so he's no longer in the fold. They've just been completely snake bitten, and this thing has sort of gotten away from them to the point where, now all the talk. I mean, they remember the season started. Everybody had Utah sort of penciled in of, okay, they're going to represent the Big 12 in the college football playoff. They're going to be a 3 or 4 seed, and Cam Rising's back, and we know what happens when Cam Rising plays. They typically make a New Year's Six bowl game, as they did the last 2 years they had him, but just has not happened. So I'm sure Utah's looking at this game and they're going, hey, it's our last of the season. We're facing a team who's not much better than us. And this might be coach's last game, chance to send him out on a high note. Batari's going to get a start, and he provided a little bit of a spark against them against Iowa State. And that's the thing. I mean, they played BYU really tough, and we saw the way that game ended in the controversial fashion that it did, but they lose that game by 1. They took Iowa State to the brink last week and lost by 3. They lost by 3 to Houston. They lost by 6 to TCU. So it's like, even for all the issues Utah has had, I mean, you just flip a couple plays here and there, and it could be a completely different season for them. Not necessarily a playoff season, but, they could be at least a 7-8 win football team. So it's still going to be a challenge. That defense on their day is still really, really strong, and that's something UCF's going to have to contend with. But in terms of what they can do offensively, I mean, we think they're going to be probably very limited coming into this. And like that being said, UCF's defense did not exactly put up the best effort last week. But you can say the same thing about UCF. It's the last game. There's a lot of seniors that are going to be playing college football for the last time. We know who they are, and they want to send them out on a high note. So that's, I think, in terms of the game itself, I think that's really what I'm just looking for. I think the number one objective is just to get RJ Harvey over become the all-time UCF leader in touchdowns, because he's tied right now with Kevin Smith, I think with 46, if I have that correct. So I think that's probably objective number 1, and then you go from there.
Yeah, and let's call this like it is. This game is about sending the seniors out on a high note. RJ Harvey and Kobe Hudson being those guys you really want to get a win for. I mean, we talked about the transfers early and Gus bringing guys like, RJ was brought in, during the ending of Heupel's time. And the work that RJ has put in, and I think that's where, if there's a blueprint for a college player to just work his ass off and get everything that's coming to him and it being so deserved, it's RJ Harvey. And then on the flip side, Gus brought in Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson. And those are two, you're going to look back on it and be like, how could UCF not have won more games with these guys? Because these are they're going to be 2 NFL receivers that were on your roster at the same time, starting alongside each other, and you just couldn't get over the hump. They had the one good year in the American, so I'll give them that, but in the Big 12, it just wasn't the same. That's the goal of this game. Besides the X and the O's, besides, okay, which is what team going to do, it's get a win for RJ Harvey, get a win for Kobe Hudson, send them out on a high note, because there's not much high these last 2 years. Gus, I think Steven Leonard asked the question about wanting to get RJ that touchdown, and Gus said 100%, which, if you score at all, it needs to be with him. He needs to get that. It needs to be the one positive for fans. He is a UCF legend. All that good stuff. With that being said, you mentioned the Utah defense, and we'll talk about UCF's offense against them right now, but this offense kind of has been stagnant, I guess you could say. Like, even against Arizona State, it wasn't as fluid as you would like. It was definitely a big drop-off. Then against West Virginia, it was really bad. This is a tough defense. And knowing Kyle Whittingham, knowing how Utah operates on defense, their objective is going to be to stop the run, stop RJ Harvey. So what does UCF need to do on offense, especially Dylan Risk and how he's been playing, to really get on track against, in my opinion, one of the better defenses in the country when healthy?
Yeah, it's not going to be easy, but one thing I have noticed is Utah sometimes has a they can tend to play this very sort of soft zone defense that I think some teams have been able to take advantage of here down the stretch. So that's something that I'm sure UCF's going to try to exploit. And again, you could try to bottle up RJ Harvey all you want. And there were teams sort of during the middle part of the schedule that clearly were maybe limiting him a little bit, which is still amazing that he's gotten to the yardage total that he has. But you've been seeing more lately. He's been getting to the open field, and he's been making those splash plays that we expect to see from RJ Harvey. So, with all respect to the Utah defense, I still think RJ Harvey's going to have a big day. I mean, this is his last college football game. He knows it. He's ready to roll. It's one last. I mean, there's nothing that else he can really show the talent evaluators at this moment that they don't already know. But it is one final game for him to sort of show out. I'm sure he's going to be motivated at the fact that he was not a finalist for the Doak Walker Award. So I expect them to run. Them to run RJ Harvey like crazy in this football game, and they're going to try to send him out on a high note. And the same thing goes for Kobe Hudson. I'd love for Kobe to get the ball a lot more than he did against West Virginia, where it was just such a struggle. It felt like it was such a struggle to get him the ball at all. It was a struggle to throw the ball in general, but he's another guy who is clearly on the minds of a lot of NFL talent evaluators, and you want him to go out on a high note and in his career the right way. So I think that's just the game plan. I think we at this point, Sean, we've already established that there's not many guys you can trust in that group, but Kobe's that guy. So let's try to get both those guys involved and see what happens.
Yeah, I think the goal should be Harvey over 25 carries. Try to get him to 200 yards on the day. And I think Kobe, it should be 10 plus targets. And listen, this is what I'm saying. Throw the ball to Kobe Hudson. It's the last game. You're not playing for anything. You're playing for a dub. Just throw the ball to Kobe Hudson. Put some stuff on tape for NFL evaluators. Because what helps your program more than players getting drafted and the round that they're getting drafted in? That's what you're playing for. It doesn't matter. The win matters to send out your seniors on a high note. What's more important is getting more good stuff on tape, and it's just one game.
Well, that's us saying that. The players want to win the game, obviously, and the coaches 100%. Want to win too. You lose 7 of 8. You hate that feeling. Trust me, as much as and that's the other thing, as much as we're frustrated, fans are frustrated about this, I'm sure this is eating Gus alive, okay? And I'm mindful of that. When we had the whole discussion about Gus, I'm mindful of the fact that this guy simply has gone his entire coaching career without having to deal with a losing season. And now he's had 2 in a row back-to-back. So I know that it's eating him alive. I know that it's eating these players alive. And the feeling of dropping another game to lose 8 of 9 and only win 2 in the conference would not. It just seems unfathomable, to be honest with you.
No, I agree. But I'm sure some of these guys want to get another game with good stuff on tape. There's no bowl game. You can make the argument the bowl game for Javon last year kind of helped his NFL situation. Not crazy, but that kind of instigated him to go to the NFL instead of staying at school. So I think one final game, sending them out on a high note with a win, and also getting them the ball as much as humanly possible seems kind of like the way to, close this game out. We could talk about the Utah offense, but again, it's been riddled with injuries. They haven't been scoring a lot of points. They've kind of found a little something the last 2 weeks, but now you're starting another new quarterback. He showed a little bit. I kind of want to get into predictions. You can kind of talk about it in your prediction, kind of how that will affect the game plan, I guess.
I will go into my prediction right now. I'm just going to jump right to it.
The spread is UCF favored by 10 points. Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah. Okay. No comment on that. I'm going to snap my streak here for the first time since... Boy, when was the last time I picked them to win a game? The Florida game. For the first time since the Florida game, I'm going to actually pick UCF to win a football game. For the first time. And I'm going to go by way of the score 31-21. 31-21.
It's hard for me to pick UCF to win. It really is. Like, I picked them to win last week.
I think RJ Harvey even more motivated this week. And the fact that it's his last game, I think he makes one final statement. I think he pushes for 200 yards on the ground. I think they feed him early and often. They lean on that. I think RJ Harvey pushes for 200 yards. I'm going to go ahead and put him on the board for 2 touchdowns, maybe a third. And it wouldn't be great if he got 4, because then he could just land on 50 career UCF touch. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting really ahead of myself. But, it's the last game, Sean. We've watched a lot of bad football. Let's just go out and let's get one. Let's just get one. Let's go out on a high note. 31-21, UCF gets it done on Black Friday inside the bounce house. It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful night, I'm sure. The weather's been fantastic. So let's get it on.
I don't know. I really don't. I'll say 24-21 UCF. 24-21. RJ Harvey with all 3 touchdowns. And yeah, I'm going to say 200 yards. My only fear is I feel like all they're going to do is load the box, which means Dylan might have a big game. But I just want to see a huge RJ Harvey game. I think everybody does. And I think they know it too. So they should just give it to make Black Friday fun. But I think UCF wins this. If you were betting the spread, I'm not a financial or betting expert, but I don't know if it's going to be 10 points plus. So take that for what you will. But not fun. Not a fun end of the season, but at least we get one final game. I do want to say that, like, I've said it kind of all year, even in the rough times. This was going to be the final game until at least spring ball, and then you get the spring game. But this will be the first or the last meaningful game of UCF football until next day, basically September. So I know it's hard right now with how bad the season has gone and how rough everything is and how negative everything is. But I will say, for those who are going to the game, who are going to watch it on TV, regardless of how they're playing, try and find some enjoyment. Try and find some peace to put the season to bed, move on, and know you're not going to get it for a long, long time. Nick, final thoughts. Final pregame pod of the most forgettable season we've had doing this. And I don't think that's hyperbole.
One last bounce. There you go.
Not much bouncing is going to be taking place on Friday. I don't think a lot of people are going to be at this game, but
we'll see. I actually don't know what to expect. I want to think for the last game it'll be maybe. I don't know.
Remember last season with Houston? And now that was Black Friday. That was an early game. There was nobody. Final thought?
No, I'm all out. Trust me, I'm all out of thoughts.
I don't blame you. I'm
all out of thoughts. We spent about 40 minutes talking about Gus Malzahn, and I'm all out of thoughts.
Trust me, we appreciate Utah fans. If you did come, we're sorry. I'm sure you don't want to hear about this game either.
Are we all just a little burned out?
I think we're all burned out.
Are we all just a little burned out?
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Charge On. Thank you for tuning in to us all season. And we're not done. We've got tune in. I don't know who's going to check out our pregame and postgame show, but definitely do it. It's the final one of the year.
We got loyal fans. We got loyal fans, and we think. I guess I should say. Well, no. I'll save my final thoughts on everybody who's tuned in all year until after the Utah game. But as always, pregame show. We're still trying to coordinate what we're going to do exactly for that. But then, of course, we'll be live on the field after the game. And Sean's going to bring whatever technical issues that he wants to bring with him one final time. Trust me. It's inevitable at this point. Yeah, I joke, but I could not do any of the technical stuff you do. So thank you so much for running the show.
Oh, of course, we gotta bring content to the people, regardless of if it works or not. But we appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, comment, share. Do all that you do. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. Pre-game show, post-game show, post-game pod, and then we go into all off-season podcasts. Go back to one a week, unless some breaking news happens.
I'm excited. The off-season is going to be juicy, very juicy in East Orlando.
I think you're going to have a lot of negative charge on episodes, which are very rare. I mean, I guess not rare this season. There's been, I guess, a lot of negativity.
They're incredibly rare.
They're not going to be rare in the next couple months, I have a feeling now. But again, we appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. This has been Charge On, presented by BetOnline. Happy Thanksgiving, and we will see you Friday. Have a good one, everybody.